In this next part, we're going to look at the player properties on the script side. So go ahead and go, if you have your player character selected, go ahead and just go over to the inspector. You can double click on the player properties script right here. If you don't want to double click on it, you can also go to the scripts rollout, go down to player properties. We'll just open up the script. It's going to start off with just an empty update function right here. Now what we want to do is actually we can go ahead and clear this one out, and we'll start off with the top, and we'll just go ahead and give it a label. We'll say player properties component. Alright, and we can give it a basic description. So we'll just say description. And again, the headings and stuff for these you can always just go back to later and polish off and things. For this, it'll be just set in stores, just similar to like what we wrote before. Stores the pickups and the state of player. Alright, so what we want to do from this, if you remember, on our properties, we want to go ahead and set up a basic enumeration for the player states. And the player states we had right now were labeled basically as the Mario types right here. So let's go ahead and go into here, and we'll set up the player states. Remember, writing an enumeration, just write enum, and we'll call these player state. Okay. Now in player state, we could write it out like this. We could actually go in here and just write out this way, where we say Mario dead, Mario small, and we'll say Mario large, and I think our last one, let's see what it was, Mario fire. Alright, so we'll say Mario fire. Alright, now we could write it out like this. We could also, just if you're trying to write it out, and if you want to see a different way to write it out, you could also go about it like this. We could say this way, and this would be completely appropriate as well. We could do it like this. Right. We could also go as far as to actually write it out with not just the label on this side, but actually restate the number that it is. So we could say 0 here, and we could say this one equals 1. And 2 and 3. Alright, so we could place it this way as well. When you're writing out enumeration, it's just whatever is going to work best for you visually, so you can see it quickly and see what the properties are, where the labels are, and everything. At the same time as well, we'll go ahead and we'll comment here and there just so that we have some comments going, but we'll probably just clean up all the comments towards the end. This one though, we'll just say that the player is dead, and for this one we'll say it sets the size of Mario to small, and then here we'll say sets the size of Mario to large, and then the last one on this one, it will enable the fireball power for Mario. There we go. Alright, so this is going to be our basic player state. Okay, now for the player state, let's go ahead and create a variable that's going to hold the enumeration for us. We'll go ahead and call this one player state. However, notice that we'll just use a lowercase for the first part. Alright, so we'll say player state is going to equal capital player state dot Mario small. Alright, so what this means is that our initial player state, so the initial start, similar to our Mario properties, we need a starting point for Mario. Well, in the game, most of the time the player starts off as a small Mario, so we'll have it starting off that way. We'll just say player state is going to equal player state, and then we'll want it to be the Mario small. Alright, so we'll say it's going to set the display state of Mario in the inspector. So we'll say set the display state of Mario in the inspector, and also in the game when it starts off if we have it enabled. Oops. Alright, so the next thing, once we have the basic state set in, let's go ahead and put in our variables. If you remember from our properties here, we've got lives, keys, coins, projectiles, sockets, and materials. So let's go ahead and set up some variables that'll hold all those for us. First one we'll just make is going to be lives, and we'll go ahead and set the the type to an integer. There's no reason to have it as anything else. And we'll go ahead and do a 4. And the lives, actually, we'll do a 3. I think Mario starts off as 3 on those. Do another one here. We'll say the keys, and again, keys we're not going to actually define. I'll leave this as an option for you, that if you want to have them in the game, then you could have it where Mario's actually collecting keys in order to pass certain parts of the level. Then we have coins. Coins will be an important one that we look at. So we'll say coins, and the coins is just going to equal 0 to start with, because he doesn't have any when he starts the game. And then we'll have the one that we're going to use. This is going to be we're going to make the projectile for the fire option. So for this is going to be something to actually use to shoot the balls out with. And just as a quick reminder, is that in your prefabs, if you remember looking through them, one of your prefabs for it is actually the we've got the, let's see, where is it at? Projectiles. Here we go. So back up towards the top. Let's make sure we see it here. I think it'll be this one. Yeah. The prefab fireball. So we'll actually have the fire projectile that we'll be using for it. So we'll have all the parts and pieces we need. So let's go ahead and keep writing these in. So we'll do the projectile fire. And for this one, we're actually just going to be looking for that whole game object. So we'll go ahead and just use the full game object there. And then let's go ahead and create another projectile. Now the projectile for this one, what we actually want to do is the sockets. So we'll just call socket right. And we just need the transform from it. So we'll just check for the transform. And again, here we'll just do a Control D just to make a copy of it real quick. We'll do a socket left on this. And so we have a socket right, a socket left, and then if you remember from our properties over here, we also need material for the texture swaps. So remember, when you're replacing a texture from one object to another, you want to replace the material, not just, you don't want to just go to the texture side of it, you want to replace the entire material. So for instance, in our materials, for the character, we've got Mario Standard here, and this is going to be the standard Mario character. And then along with that one, we've also got the fire one, and the fire one is the character who's the white and red outfit. Alright, so we'll be replacing the full material on that, so we'll actually need, the easiest way would just simply be to have the materials drugged into the inspector. So we'll go ahead and just call those up here. So we'll call it material, oops, let's make sure we're inside here. So we just say material Mario Standard. And this will just be a material type that we'll grab. And then same thing, again we can push Control D to make a copy of this. We'll get the material Mario and fire. Alright. Let's go ahead and kind of line these up here. There we go. So with this gives us our material types that we need. It gives us our projectiles for the sockets left and right, the coins, the lives. Then we need a couple of two other ones, which would be the ability to turn off and on. We're just going to need like to be able to enable the change states. So we'll have two checks: one to see if he has a fireball, and then one to check for whether he's changing. So we'll create two of these. We'll just call this one Change Mario, and we'll make this a boolean, and we'll go ahead and just set it to false. And then for the other one, we'll check for whether he has a fireball. So we'll just say has fire. And we'll set this one to false as well. Now again, we can actually, we could set those through the inspector. Now we can set those to true, so that the player starts off that way. We can set his state to fire, and then we can set that yes, he's at this state and he has fire, so he could actually start that one. Alright, so we also have a couple of private variables we want to put into here. We'll do a private variable for the coin life. This will be the extra life that you can get. And we'll go ahead and set the integer instead of doing the 0, let's go ahead and make sure we set it to a number. Now, typical for Mario would be 100 coins to get an extra life. You can set it to whatever number. Like for ours, if we don't do a large level, then it would be very difficult to get the 100. So you can set it to a lower one if you just want to test the properties for it. Alright, so we have another private variable. We can do one that's going to be a can shoot. We're going to use this one as another statement to make sure that players actually can shoot the fireball. Alright, and we'll go ahead and set this one to false as well. Okay, so this is going to set us up for all of our variables and our enumerations that we need for the player properties. The next thing that we want to do is we could go ahead and save this. And if you go back over to your inspector, once it fills out for the player properties right here, you'll notice that we have our options, so we can go ahead and stick the elements inside of here. First thing that we need is a projectile fire. You can either click on the small circle button right here, which opens up your browser. You could choose the prefab fireball. You could also just drag it in from over on the side. It's going to be looking for the socket right and left. Let's go ahead and go to the player in the hierarchy tab. Inside of here, you'll see the projectile socket left and right. Just go ahead and left click and drag these to the appropriate spots. We'll take the left and the right to those. And then the material type. So the materials that we just looked at. If we were inside of the project tab and you saw these, you could just drag them over. The animation sheet for standard will go into the Mario standard. And then the Mario sheet for fire will go into the Mario fire. Alright, and something just as a reminder here, notice that we have our player state, and because we set the current player state to Mario Small, it shows up in the inspector as Mario Small. If you left click on this, you'll get your drop down. You can actually choose which state you want the player to be in. Alright, and then we also have lives currently set to 3. Alright. So, that's going to give us our basic property setup for Mario. Let's go ahead and make some things happen inside of here. So, let's go ahead and start off. We'll do a function update. And before we define inside the function update, let's go ahead and set up our basic functions that we were talking about before, which we were in the from the Mario properties. We were going to have an add keys, coins, and set player state. So we'll go ahead and set up those, and then we'll use those inside the update function. When you're working on functions, if you start creating just a list of functions, which is a great way to work, is to have a set of functions you're using and just calling through the update. One of the best practices is just go ahead and lay them out. Even though there's nothing inside it, go ahead and lay out the functions so you have them all ready. So let's see, we'll place the set of functions in here. We'll just call this one, it's going to be function add keys. Alright, and oops. Let's do the next one. Next one we'll do is add coin. So function add coin. Alright, and then the last one that we'll have, which we had on there, was set player state. So we'll do one more function, and this will just be the set player state. Alright. So we've got our functions that we'll be filling in with the information from above and from our variables and our types. Also, we can go ahead and just add this one. If you remember, when you want to add an add component menu, meaning that you want to be able to add a menu item up here, then you can actually just go down here. We can do the @ symbol. So the @ symbol, we'll call up our script, and then we'll just call this one add component. And when you add a component menu inside of this, and remember this is just when you want to look for a reference on this one, it's just part of your hotkeys. There's an option explaining how to do this. We'll fill in the properties where we want it to be. So we'll just call one Walker Boys, and we'll say actor, and then we'll say player properties, and we'll call it script. Alright. So this will be simply assigning the this script to the menu. Alright. So again, if we actually take this, we save it out. If we go over to here, we'll actually get a, once it reads in, we'll get a Walker Boys option inside of here. So if we go up to our components, and we look at our component because we're adding to the component menu, we'll notice that we have the Walker Boys, and then actor, and player property script. So when you want to start making your scripts more organized, and we'll do this when we finish off the project, we'll also start to organize all the scripts. But when you start doing it, you can just add it this way. That way, instead of going to scripts and choosing from the full list, you can just go to here and be very specific with what you want. Alright? Okay, so inside of here, let's go ahead and start off by just looking at the basic properties for our functions in here. One of the first things we want to do when we're looking at adding, like for keys and coins and things, we need to actually have some properties inside of this that we want. First thing that we want to do on the add keys is we just want to assign a couple of elements in here. So we'll say num key. We'll make this an integer. So when we're adding a key, we want to be able to pull in a key into the function. And we'll just do a very simple thing. We'll call this key plus equals num key. And the key itself, along with the coins, we're going to set these up inside of another script file so that when we're calling and adding to it, we're just able to call into them and add additional keys every time we grab one. Same thing for the coins. Let's go ahead and inside of the function, let's do a num coin. And again, we'll just make this type an integer. And we'll do coins is going to equal coins plus numCoin. Alright. And we could also do coins, it could also be just coins plus equals numCoins. Either way. Okay, so then the last one, the set player state. Now remember, when we're doing this is something that once you've thought through your whole process, you'll start to understand how you can get this and how you can use it. But that's part of that is actually building up the code. At this state, what we're doing is just kind of going over what the functions have already been created and their parameters and properties for them. For the set player state, inside of it, we just want to place in a basic set of elements. The parts and pieces for this player state are going to be part of calling up the enumeration. And the best way to call up enumeration when you're checking for different states is actually use a switch in case. So we'll start off by just setting in what we currently have. In order to check, part of the things that we need to actually get though, in order to actually check the player state, we also are going to need to be able to get access to the player controls. So let's go ahead and get our access to our player controls. We'll set up a new variable inside of here. We'll just grab the player controls. It's going to equal our get component. And the get component, the option that we want inside of here is just our player control script. Alright. And then we also want to be able to set from here, we just want to get our character controller. So we'll get our character controller. Now the reason we're getting these two options, the character controller, so that we can actually grab our character. For instance, when the Mario guy grabs the grabs one of the like say the mushrooms, make him grow and make him a little bit larger. Well, if he's small, the character controller object needs to either grow or shrink based on the character. So we need to actually control that and be able to move him. So we'll go ahead and grab the character controller, and we'll just set our, let's see, so character controller is going to again equal our get component. And this is going to actually be, oops, we actually don't need quotes for that one. This will be the setting it to a character controller. There we go. Alright, so we have two variables we'll be able to use inside of here. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit longer so you can see the bottom side. Alright, so we have the character controller and the player controls. Let's start off by just going and doing a switch statement. Okay, now we had the player, we have our player state right here. So we'll use the player state inside the switch. And the player state for this, just remember the basic structure for it. We'll go ahead and grab these. inside the switch, we're going to need different cases. So we'll start off with case, the first one, which we'll call up our player state enumeration, and we'll check for our Mario Small. Alright, so this will be the first one that we look at. The player state Mario Small, what we want to actually do is check for a couple of things. Now remember, when we're doing this one, for instance, when we call up a state, Mario Small is going to be for this, at least for this one, we don't have a material swap. We're actually just going to scale the character himself, like we would scale him down like this, so that he was just smaller on the screen. Alright, so in order to access that, we'll actually be needing to get the character's transform and local scale, and then we could actually scale it down. For right now, though, let's actually not fill anything in. We're just going to do the cases. So, for instance, I'm going to set each of the cases on this, and I'll just do a break. So, the next case that we want to do, this is going to be the player state.Mario large. Alright, and we're just pulling from the states we have up here. Alright, and then the next state, let's make sure we do a break. Alright, and then the next case, we'll do the player state, and this one, we'll just do Mario Fire. And the break. And then the next case is going to be player state, and we'll do Mario Dead. Alright, so this will finish off our states that we actually need for it. The last state that we could do, though, is actually just the default state, so it would break out. Shouldn't need it, though, just in terms of what we currently have should work for all the cases. At this point, we can actually call it up. It'll call up to nothing because there's nothing inside, so it'll call up and then just break out. What we want to do at this point, though, is do a couple of little checks. So for instance, if we call up this state, simple things to start off with. When you're writing in your own code and you're not sure what you've got or what you have or don't have, you can just do a print, and you can say Mario Small. And we could do the same thing, and we could actually just do this for each one of these. And we'll just do this. We'll say Mario Large. And we'll do it again for down here. Mario Fire, and we'll do Mario Dead. So the only thing that's going to happen is when you go to the different state, it'll just simply print this one. But for the first time through, it's really good just to know that that your cases are working when the player state's changed. So for instance, I could save this, and we'll go over to here. When we play it, so for instance on this, when I play it, by default the player is actually small over here. And so if we actually have this checked to, let's double check here, make sure we got it on true. Actually, let's be sure, make sure we actually have this up inside of our update function. So go ahead and go back to your update, and let's go ahead and just type in, we want to use our function for set player state. So we'll just do set player state function. We'll just call that inside of here. So inside the update, just call the set player state. And again, once you go back into here, now that it's inside your update, when this plays through in your console, you'll start getting a print for Mario Small. So then if we go over to our player properties, and on the drop down, you could actually say Mario Dead. So now you should see the change here. If we go to say Mario Large, we get the change again. Alright, so this is actually allowing you just to know that when you're actually changing the state, it is going to your switch, it's reading your case, and then whatever's inside the case, for instance for us, is just currently a print. Alright, so that sets us up for the basic setup for all of our functions. We now have the ability to set up all the information in the player states. When we're ready to actually start calling up adding coins, we can add coins, we can add keys. All of those are going to start working for us. Alright, so in the next part, we'll get into filling out all the different states for these and getting the player to actually change size and scale and everything like that.